Good morning, everyone. First, let me just make sure that I have not messed up the device, and I have not, so we should be recording. Happy Easter. And also, Happy Pesach. For those who are celebrating Passover, yesterday was the first day of Passover, and it's an interesting paradox this year, because Passover and Easter often do this dance around the calendar, but this year in particular, we had Erev Passover or Erev Pesach fall on Good Friday. Two very different parts of this shared theological lineage, this really interesting family dynamic of cousins who don't agree on some things and really agree on the other stuff. But it's an important, it's lovely actually in a way, because starting this month on April Fool's Day, with the idea of trust being our theme for the month, there are any manner of places we could take this conversation. But in all seriousness, there is this paradox, though, in the theology of these two traditions, one born of the other. And it's important, I think, to dig into the idea and into the theological, but also the spiritual and the metaphysical ideas of trust that are both shared through both of these stories. So, I like to start with going to the Gospel according to Merriam-Webster on all of these terms, so that we actually have a place where we can all start from around what do we mean by trust, because trust means different things to different people. But the dictionary tells us that trust is an assured reliance on the character, ability, strength, or truth of someone or something. That's the first definition. An assured reliance. So you rely, but you're assured, like you've got enough evidence that you don't have to question. There's an assured reliance on the character or the ability or the strength or the truth of someone or something. Someone or one in which confidence is placed. A second definition is the dependence on something future or contingent. So you don't have it right now, but you are convinced that it is coming, and that there is a dependence on whatever that thing is that's coming in the future. You have a dependence on it. And then there's a third definition, which is a little bit more in the financial legal realm, but it is a property interest held by one person for the benefit of another. So often we see this in terms of monies or properties or resources that are left in trust for someone at such time that they can actually either manage it, take care of it, or they're age appropriate to receive that gift. So we've got these three definitions, and I'd like for you to consider, not just for the time of this talk and certainly not for today, but as part of an ongoing meditation throughout the month, who or what do you trust today? Who or what do you trust? On what truth have you placed assured reliance? Where are the places in your life where there's assured reliance around certain truths that have manifested for you over the course of your life? Who or what are you depending on? What's the future that you see that's coming down the highway that you're depending that future actually happens, that it actually comes to be? And where is your heart entrusted? Where have you entrusted that center core of yourself that is that communicates with the divine? Where you and the divine, there is no separation. Where the veil is gone and you experience God, divine mind, however you relate to that power, that force, Where is that for you? Where is the trust in that relationship? Because ultimately, I think both Easter and Passover and any other day or moment where we stop to reflect on pivotal moments are all opportunities for us to examine, what do we trust? Because the people in these stories trusted with their very lives. So the Easter story, and I like to talk about these things in terms of myth. So the first myth I'd like to say is that trust requires that there is no doubt. So we often kind of think about the things or the people that we trust. We've gotten to a place, or at least we say, we've gotten to a place where we don't doubt that anymore. And I'm going to challenge that today and say that's not completely true. We may doubt it less than we doubt other things. But even with the things that we hold to be true, like there is this force greater than us that we are in co-collaboration with, even that we have seen evidence of its power and its might in our lives, even that periodically we're kind of like, God, where are you? What's going on? Like, I thought I had dealt with this already and now this thing is back, so what's going on? So we do still have moments where we doubt things. And while the Easter story largely reflects on the resurrection and the moving away of the stone and the recognition that the dead body of Jesus has resurrected. And it's very interesting, when we talk about resurrection, we're not talking about has like transmuted and turned into ghostly appearance. We're talking about, just like the other stories we've heard, brought back to life from the dead. There's a difference between the resurrection and the ascension. The ascension is when that body goes back to heaven. But the resurrection really is that body that they wrapped up, did all of the rituals on, washed with water and prepared with oils and sweet herbs and wrapped in the tunic and put in the tomb and closed the stone over it, that body rose from the dead and then just started showing up places. That's the story. Do you know what I mean? We want to like get straight about what the story is. Because I think, in our efforts, often in our efforts to understand the divine, we shrink the divine down so that we can understand it at a level that's comfortable for us. So, there's a lot of kind of like controversy and talk about whether the body actually resurrected and whether somebody physically moved the stone and people came in the middle of the night and took the body away. And, well, we don't really, but it's kind of like it doesn't matter, on one hand, whether you believe the body was resurrected or not. But what we do believe is that there was a trust in that being that was laid in the tomb, that its relationship with the divine was so profound that that Jesus could raise others from the dead, could drive illness out of people, could make the lame to walk, could inspire other people to not only follow him, but after his death to continue his work. So whether you believe the body was resurrected or not, we could certainly agree that he trusted in the divine in a way that sometimes we can't access, and other people trusted him. So with that, and with this idea about doubt, rather than focus on just the resurrection, let's go to the day after the resurrection, when Jesus for the first time appears before first Mary Magdalene and then appears before the other disciples. But somebody was missing. Thomas wasn't there. And so Thomas was kind of like, upon hearing that that Jesus has indeed been resurrected and he was here, we were, all here, and Jesus just showed up. Thomas was kind of like, you're going to have to prove that to me. I want to put my hands where the holes are in his hand, and I want to put my hand on where they pierced him in the side. Then I will believe this nonsense that you're talking about, that he has actually been resurrected. And spirit is actually not something, and you probably figured this out by now, spirit is not something you ought to challenge. Like, you can't play truth or dare with God. Because God will show up in a way that other people will not. And so 8 days, it says, after that first appearance, in a room where the door was closed, the windows were closed, Jesus just appears again. And this time, Thomas is there. And Jesus says to him, then saith he to Thomas, reach hither thy finger and behold my hands. And reach hither thy hand and thrust it into my side. And be not faithless, but believing. And Thomas answered and said unto him, my Lord and my God. Jesus saith unto him, Thomas, because thou hast seen me, thou hast believed. Blessed are they that have not seen and yet have believed. This is also where we get the phrase doubting Thomas from. This is where the idea of the doubting Thomas comes from. That Thomas doubted and had to physically be shown and experienced Jesus in order for him to believe that he had actually resurrected. But what Jesus said is that that's all well and good. That's good for you, Thomas. But the people who actually can believe without seeing, they are also blessed. Believing something without seeing it is this little thing we call faith. It is the driver or one of the foundational principles of trust, because trust can often be left to just what we physically see or what we know someone can do. But true trust is when you have no evidence to back it up. Where just because you actually just declare, I trust him or her or it. Does this make sense? Okay. So the second myth I want to talk about is that true or trust doesn't require sacrifice. Because somehow we've actually whittled trust down to that we don't there's not like a building process where you get to trust. Like we sometimes think about, well, we're spiritual people and we're all infused with the light and we're all very ethereal and loving, and so therefore we should just be able to trust each other, and it's all very lofty, and not recognizing that we're still human beings with the same limitations that we had before. And so with this idea of trust, trust actually does require sacrifice. You've got to give something up in order to actually trust another person. You got to give something up. So when we look at the Passover story is certainly about sacrifice. There's sacrifice that goes on in this story, but really the story is more about faith and endurance of these people, of these houses of Israel, throughout all that they had experienced, still believing that one day they would be free and might be able to stop running for their lives from one master to another. So what's interesting is that in the story of Passover, which again, there's this paradox because you've got Jesus at the end of his life, but then you have the houses of Israel being led by Moses and Aaron and Miriam, and that they're in this battle with the Pharaoh. And Moses is coming. I don't know about you. I'll be 54 this year. Every year on Easter, what used to happen was the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston and all of that drama. And I loved it. It was the best thing ever. Until you start getting older and you realize like what it took, you know, all the little tricks that they had to do. But when they push back the Red Sea and drowns the whole Egyptian army, like that was the best thing ever on like a little television. But that's not quite the sacrifice I was talking about. And so the house of Israel had been embattled for years. And Pharaoh was kind of like, no matter what happened, whether it was the boils or the frogs or lice or turning the Nile into blood, nothing would change the Pharaoh's decision not to release the Israelites. And Nefertiti had a little bit to do with that. But he still wouldn't be convinced. And finally, God said, okay, I'm done now. I'm taking off the gloves. This is what's going to happen. Moses, you and Aaron, tell all of the houses of Israel to find a young lamb, kill it, and use the blood to actually mark the doors where you, the house of Israel, are. Because what is going to happen is that the firstborn of Egypt, both man and animal, are going to die tonight. That's what's going to happen. Now, Aaron and Moses called forth all the elders of the houses of Israel and told them this, told them exactly what God said to them, that if they put the blood over the door, the destroyer would know them to be houses of Israel, and death would then pass over them. This was the elders' reaction. And the people bowed the head and worshiped. And the children of Israel went away and did as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. So did they. There was no, you want me to do what? You want me to kill what? And put what above my door? There was none of that. Because at this point, the houses of Israel were used to the experience of the divine stepping in to provide escape or cover or assurance that if we are faithful to what God says, God will take care of us. There was no kind of hemming and hawing. This was a different kind of Moses than was at the bush. Because Moses at the burning bush was kind of like, what? You want me to go get who? Well, I'm not a person of words. I stutter. You just go and I will tell you what to say. I will take care of the rest. And what's little known that we don't pay that much attention to is that Aaron was the spokesperson. Aaron was often the one who was actually making the declaration to Pharaoh, but Moses was the one who was chosen to kind of lead the whole thing. So I looked up on the website, and when you look at our website, in the Declaration of Principles, this is what number 3 says. We affirm the unity of God and humanity, in that the divine nature dwells within and expresses through each of us by means of our acceptance of it as health, supply, wisdom, love, life, truth, power, beauty, and peace. That's what the principles, third principle of this congregation, of this spiritual gathering says. Do you trust that? How's that going? Are you bringing forth health, supply, wisdom, love, life, truth, power, beauty, and peace? What do you have to sacrifice in order to have that be so? What do you have to finally put an end to that really has to do solely with you? What's that thing that you have been worrying yourself about and in therapy for and can't ever stop talking about it, and it won't let you rest, and every time you think you have it covered, it comes back? What's that? Because that's the place where faith exists. That's the place, that's the thing to work on so that you can trust in what that thing is revealing to you. Because without it, then we're just kind of playing lip service to the things that we say we want and our relationship to the divine. And there's an opportunity for all of us in our lives to live by faith, because that's what happened for the Israelites. They didn't know, they had nothing but faith to believe that death itself would pass them over. But in order to do that, we have to grow in what we say we believe. And that takes me to my third and final myth, which is that trust has nothing to do with love. We kind of think that trust is almost this different kind of emotion, that it's somehow built into almost kind of like the difference between knowing how to drive a nail into a piece of wood and building a house. That somehow these things are disparate. But without love, you cannot trust, because love is the center of it all. Everything springs from love. In our lives today, we're presented with daily situations where we don't trust, or we don't think that we can. We struggle with trusting friends who have disappointed us. We find it hard to trust family members who may have misrepresented themselves or with whom we have not been honest. So we've just kind of gone the whole time and let them believe whatever, and it was just easier to not say anything, but then we have not confessed. We have not shared authentically with them how their behavior impacts us. We don't know if we can trust coworkers who say, "Oh, I'm on your side," until they start announcing the layoffs. Then where are you? And we doubt, many of us doubt profoundly in our elected officials of the day and the structure and the operation of society. And we don't trust that choices and decisions are actually being made in our best interest toward a spiritual higher purpose. We don't trust that. So if it is that our life is consumed with all of these opportunities to not trust, what can become the compass? What gets us out of that? And what gets us out of that is love. And I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm not talking about eros. I'm talking about agape. Divine love. The kind of love that would give its only begotten Son so that the world could be reconciled back to God. The kind of love that would guide a people through generations until they understood freedom and safety as realities. Where in your life have you received love that inspires that assured reliance on character or ability or strength or trust? And the other question is, when have you been that for someone else? Because every day we have the opportunity to be a loving presence that inspires trust in other people. In the midst of this paradox, of these two great traditions, the one thing that is constant is love. And if we're going to trust more, we're going to have to love each other more. Happy Easter, happy Pesach. God bless you, and thank you so much.